So let's talk about Hoodoo. Let's talk about Palo Mayombe. Let's talk about the book on Palo. Let's talk about closed practices, who and who should not be practicing these things. Don't get bent, okay? Don't get all bent out of shape and think I'm attacking anybody. I'm not attacking anyone, okay? I just need you to know the truth and where all this stuff comes from. Because origins are important. They are importante. Let's cut to the chase about Hoodoo, okay? Hoodoo is African American slave magic. It comes from the Congo. The first boat of African slaves that were brought over in the slave trade that showed up in the southern parts of the United States and South Carolina, that was a boat full of Congolese Africans. And when they showed up, they brought their traditional practices. That's where you get Galageechi people. That's where you get hoodoo and root work. It doesn't come from Ireland, Catherine Yonderwood, Uncle Birch. And although it might have some Native American influence, the tradition of hoodoo is African. It doesn't come from anywhere else. Why can I say this? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because it's in the technique. It's in how the magic is practiced that makes it hoodoo. If you've studied African spirituality as long as I have, and you've been initiated into these practices, and you've sat with priests and watched them practice these practices, you would recognize that African spirituality has its own way of going about doing things. It is the way people practice the magic that makes it the magic. And it is the spirits on the other end that people are calling that also make it the magic. So when hoodoo practitioners are calling on ancestors, they're calling on the ancestors that practiced that magic. Yes, we all use candles. We all might use Florida water. We all might use sigils or herbal preparations. But it's the spirits that are called. It's the ancestors that are called that empower the tradition. And if you don't have those ancestors, there's going to be nobody picking up on the other end of the phone if you try to cast a spell using a hoodoo technique. It's going to be like texting a landline, okay? No one's going to respond to you. You might get a spirit guide who's trying to help you out, but you are not going to get the lineage. You are not going to get the ancestors that practiced this magic, brought it to the new world, and codified it into a spiritual system. But don't we all come from Africa? 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa to populate the rest of the world. But hoodoo as a spiritual practice is unique to the United States, to the South, and to Black Americans, African slaves, and their descendants. That's what makes it a closed practice. That. But when you watch a root worker who's practicing conjure, you're going to see that they're going to be doing the same kind of stuff that we do in Palo Mayombe. Why? Because Palo Mayombe and hoodoo, they come from the same root. They come from the Congo. Now, talking about Palo Mayombe. Palo Mayombe is a tradition that's an initiatic tradition, okay? People can get scratched into Palo Mayombe. It's a very specific ceremony that's done to unite the person with the spirituality. It's very, very complicated. But what I am going to tell you is that this book on Palo, you shouldn't read it. Why? Because for me, that's not where the origin or the root of Palo comes from. What happened over time, over hundreds of years, is Palo as a tradition, which is considered witchcraft to a lot of people, or necromancy, which it is, kind of, got mixed up with like Islamic stuff. It pulled in magic from the magical grimoires. There's even a syncretization between the spirits that are worked with in Palo, with Orishas, even with saints in the Catholic Church. So Palo Mayombe today, what you see a lot of people practice is a hybridization. It's a hybrid tradition of a lot of different techniques, okay? That's why it's an initiatic secret society, a fraternity that you join, but it's not necessarily closed by ethnicity. That's the difference between Palo and hoodoo. But like I said before in my previous video, Palo, its root, the Nganga, is the shaman in Africa. The person responsible for making herbal medicines, protective talisman, okay? Performing exorcism, the witch doctor, okay? The person that protects people from witchcraft. And a lot of people over there, after Catholicism migrated into the Congo, they became Catholics, and the Ngangas were Catholics, and they continued to practice their herbal medicine. They continued to practice their traditional spiritual herbalism, despite the fact that they converted to Catholicism. And Haitian voodoo, the Congo rites in Haitian voodoo are like sisters to Palo Mayombe. So Palo Mayombe and Haitian voodoo are very, very similar. There's a lot of Congo influence in Haitian voodoo. This book, Santeria, the Religion, by this person, talks a lot about the negative practices that you will find in Palo. There are practices that are performed in certain branches and sects and fraternities in Palo Mayombe and Haitian voodoo that are pretty vile, okay? They're pretty hot. If you get on Google and look for Palo Mayombe, you're gonna get a lot of articles about like animal sacrifices, animal torture, grave robbing, going to the cemetery and digging up dead bodies, even human sacrifice. There is a positive and negative component to every religion. I don't care what it is. Hinduism and the Agori yogis, okay? That's the dark side of Hinduism. You have Christianity, but you have its opposite, which is Satanism. So there is positive and negative aspects in all practices. You can choose to practice on the side of the light, or you can choose to practice in the darkness, because whatever you call is going to come. So you got to think about what kind of spiritual energies you're trying to draw to yourself. Now, Palo is darker, okay? It's very earthy, okay? It does work with dead things, dead spirits, and then like materials that, you know, are dead, including, you know, we call it the Garden of Blood and Bones, because all substances in the physical world have energy. All carbon-based people and animals and things have energy. And we work with those things. We work with those energies. It's the same energies that are worked with in hoodoo. It's the same energies that are worked with in voodoo. So what about people who are trying to practice Palo or trying to practice voodoo, who are not initiated, who have not got their lave tet, who have not got scratched in Palo? Well, it's very, very simple. These spirits are not going to respond to you if you're not a member of these traditions. That's it. If someone picks up this book, okay, the book on Palo, and decides they want to be cute and they want to start practicing African necromancy, and they try to call or conjure one of these spirits, the spirit is going to show up and it's going to look at you and it's going to be like, I don't know you. And depending on what spirit you call on, fuck around and find out. Trying to practice closed practices or closed religions without getting an initiation or being formally introduced to these practices is like getting in somebody else's car, stealing it, and driving down the road without a driver's license. If you get pulled over by the cops, you're going to get arrested because you're driving without a license. You're also driving somebody else's car. That's what it's like trying to do things that belong to a certain group of people or belong to a certain fraternity. You can't wake up one morning and decide that you're a Catholic. You can't decide that I'm a Catholic. I think I'm going to serve myself and all my friends communion now. It don't work that way, because people who are Catholic priests are sanctioned by the church, by the organization, to do their job. But you can read about this. You can read about all of this, but it doesn't mean that you should practice it. It doesn't mean that you can practice it, because there are rules, there are laws in the spiritual world that are also enforced by the spiritual world. But going back to all of my African American friends that are interested in learning about hoodoo, this is a great book, Mojo Working. Great book about hoodoo. The first book you need to read about hoodoo. Another great book, Workin' Dem Roots, Guide to Ancestral Hoodoo by the Medicine Man to Hoodoo Man. Sticks, Stones, Roots, and Bones, Hoodoo Mojo Conjuring with Herbs by Stephanie Rose Bird. For all of my black friends out there that are trying to connect with that kind of spirituality, read that. Also, if you're black and you want to know where your people come from, drop that $100 and get your Ancestry DNA test or your 23andMe DNA test. When you do that, you'll be able to find out in your DNA, in your blood, where your ancestors came from and which parts of Africa. These are all things worth investing in if you have the ancestors or you have the license to practice it.